Welcome back to the Football Game Tonight podcast. I'm your host, John Kuzma. In this latest episode, we're going to talk about Shedeur Sanders. We're going to talk a little bit about Travis Hunter. We'll do the Jimmy Horn story. And then we're going to debate Lamar Jackson versus Joe Burrow. Then we'll dive into the Malik Neighbors versus Marvin Harrison Jr. debate. I think you'll be a little surprised where we go on that one. So let's start with the Shedeur Sanders story, and it's not surprising that we're leading with Shedeur Sanders. You know, we did a past podcast on Shedeur Sanders, and I think this story has gotten even better since then. Remember, all the hype has been on Shedeur Sanders since draft night. He takes a massive slide all the way down to the fifth row. People were talking about this guy being a first-round pick, and then he just tumbles on draft night. And it wasn't because of his play. When Shedeur Sanders goes on record and says most of the hate he receives is because of his dad, Deion Sanders, I think there's some truth to that because these teams in the NFL, the owners, the GMs, and the front offices wanted to stick it to Shedeur Sanders because of character concerns. It was never about whether or not Shedeur Sanders can play or not. And when you look at what Shedeur Sanders is doing at OTAs for the Browns, I mean, this guy can flat out play. And he's making all the throws. He looks like a franchise quarterback, a guy that can lead this team into the future, which is so hard to find. You know, when we go through these pre-draft evaluations and we look at these quarterbacks, most of these guys don't work out. It's not easy to evaluate the quarterback position. They come in all these different shapes and sizes, and they all do different things well. It's not easy to evaluate a quarterback. You can see when a defense end's going to tear things up because he's just so physically gifted that people won't be able to keep up. You know, with quarterbacks, it's totally different. It's hard to evaluate these guys. But when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, it's clear that he has all the tools to be successful in the National Football League. You know, in the past episode, I talked about Shedeur Sanders. I said one of the best things about this guy is he can see the football field, and that's being proven at OTAs. You know, this guy is so good at getting through his reads, knowing where to go with the football, the decision-making, the things that, you know, make up being a good quarterback in the NFL, because there's a lot of guys that have huge arms, a lot of guys that can throw the football 70, 80 yards with a flick of the wrist. But when they get into processing the game, they get confused by what the defenses are throwing at them. And with Shedeur Sanders, I think this guy can just decipher what the defense is trying to do to him. I think he can break it down. I think he can make his pre-snap reads, which separates the good quarterbacks from the great quarterbacks in the National Football League. So with Shedeur Sanders making all these throws, making these throws on time, hitting, you know, his guys in stride in the back corner of the end zone, and the relationships that he's developing with his receivers, to me it's like, how can you not be blown away about this guy? And not only this guy, this story of this quarterback that the league turned their back on and said he wasn't good enough to be a first-round pick, and then a second-round pick, and then a third-round pick, and then a fourth-round pick. This guy's not good enough to be one of those higher picks? I mean, come on now. It's embarrassing what the league did to Shedeur Sanders, and now Shedeur Sanders is getting his revenge because he's going out there in these Browns OTAs, and he's putting it all together. He's throwing deep balls to his receivers in stride. He's using his accuracy to pinpoint the holes in the back of the end zone when he's in the red zone trying to get his offense in for 6. You know, he can break down where the holes are in the defense, thread the needle, and punch it in for 6 for his team. Do you know how long it takes some quarterbacks to develop that awareness to be able to manipulate the defense and use leverage and, you know, see where his receiver has a little window to the inside because the defensive back's playing outside shade? It's those little intricacies that turn a quarterback into one of the all-time greats because they can sniff those things out and make those plays routinely for their offense. So the fact that Shedeur Sanders is doing that right away in his very first training camp, or his very first OTAs, the fact that he's doing that as a rookie right out of the gate, I mean, come on, man. I mean, this is really impressive. He's ahead of the curve. He's ahead of where most rookies are at. It's clear to see. It's right there in the film. Look, with all that happened to Shedeur Sanders, if this guy was out there telegraphing passes, throwing interceptions, and making bad reads, it would be national coverage. Everybody would be dunking on this guy right now. That's why he fell to the 5th round. That's not the case at all. So many people were wrong about Shedeur Sanders. And, you know, he's out there proving it every single time he steps on the field at OTAs for the Browns, because he looks like, you know, the best quarterback right now for this team. Now, to me, if we're being honest, if you had to start somebody right now for the Browns and you look at the guys that are healthy, you know, Deshaun Watson is injured. We don't know what his future is going to be. You know, you might say Joe Flacco has the most experience. You know, he's been good recently. He might be the guy for the job at the moment. But how much of a future does Joe Flacco have in this league? His window is closing. So you look at the other guys on this roster that the Browns have, and if Deshaun Watson is hurt, and if Joe Flacco's window is closing, and you want to build for the future, you want to give reps to a young guy that has a bright future that can, you know, be good for 10 or 20 more years, it's obviously Shedeur Sanders. There's no debating that. There's no pushing back on that. It's solidified. Shedeur Sanders, if you're not going to go with Joe Flacco, is the guy for the Browns. If Deshaun Watson is hurt and you're not going to go with Joe Flacco because his time is winding down, then you have to go with Shedeur Sanders. The other guys that the Browns have are not there yet. It's clear as day. And Shedeur Sanders is. He's the guy that's throwing the football all over the place. He's the guy that has routinely made the most plays for the Browns offense at OTAs. And just go watch the clips of him. It's a night and day difference from the other quarterbacks that are in those OTA practices. He's the guy that looks like a starting quarterback in the National Football League, and he doesn't look like a rookie. He doesn't look like a rookie. He looks like a guy that's at least a 5-year veteran who looks cool, calm, collected in that offense. You know, he can facilitate in that offense. Hit a guy here, come back, work the other side of the field, work the middle. The ball's being distributed in different areas of the field, and it's being done with rhythm and timing. So all the people that said this guy has bad character and, you know, him throwing the watch celebration in the air, he's too cocky and too arrogant, well, looks like the joke might be on you now, because it's being proven every day that Shedeur Sanders can play at OTAs for the Browns. I'm happy for the guy, because after what he went through on draft night, he didn't deserve that. Whether you like the guy or not, he didn't deserve that. And I just wish that people would be treated justly and fairly, particularly in the NFL draft. And I don't think that was the case with Shedeur Sanders. I think they tried to stick it to him a little bit. So I'd like to see Shedeur Sanders come over the top and stick it back to all these teams that passed on him. Moving on, we got the Travis Hunter story. So Travis Hunter is taking a lot of flack at Jaguars OTAs because of how he handles himself at these practices. And there's a big difference between Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter. So Travis Hunter is always upbeat. He's always dancing. He's very loose. But that's his personality. Whereas Brian Thomas is always very focused, very locked in, doesn't show very much emotion, and just pays attention the whole time. And people are saying Travis Hunter needs to be more like Brian Thomas. But I'm here to push back on that. Different strokes for different folks. Because Travis Hunter has earned his spot in the National Football League. And if he does things a little bit differently than Brian Thomas, and don't forget Brian Thomas had a lot of success as a rookie in the National Football League. So I get where Jaguars fans are coming from. Listen to the guy who's already had success in the NFL. Don't be a guy that's dancing and acting a fool all the time because you haven't made your mark yet in the NFL. Well, if you drafted a guy that high, number 2 overall, then you have to let him be him. You don't bring him in and say, Travis Hunter, don't be Travis Hunter, be Brian Thomas. That's not how you develop talent. And if you felt that way, why'd you draft the guy in the first place? Let Travis Hunter be Travis Hunter. Let him dance, let him have fun, and let him be himself, because that's how he's going to be the best version of Travis Hunter. That's how he's going to be the best version of himself, is by being himself. Even in practices, in the day-to-day activities, in the meetings, you let him be who he is. And if that's upbeat and people are saying he's too bubbly, then so be it. Let him be that. Because this is a guy that you invested so much of your future in. You know, not only taking him, trading up and getting him. You have so much invested in Travis Hunter if you're the Jaguars that you don't want to constrain him in any ways. And I always go back to Chuck Daly with the Detroit Pistons talking about Dennis Rodman. And the quote was, like, some assistant coach was trying to reel Dennis Rodman in, and Chuck Daly pulled his assistant coach aside and said, hey, don't change him in any way. Don't change him in any way, because you don't put a saddle on a Mustang. And basically what Chuck Daly was saying is you let a Mustang run free. You let him do his thing because he is a Mustang. He's a different breed. It's the same thing with Travis Hunter. He's a Mustang. Don't put a saddle on him. Let him dance. Let him have fun. Let him be too bubbly, because this is a guy that if he's having fun and if he's energized, he could change this franchise into a perennial powerhouse. A team that goes to the playoffs every year and has big time success. I think Travis Hunter's that good, and I think he will be a superstar opposite of Brian Thomas. Different strokes for different folks. Brian Thomas, cool, calm, and collected. The silent assassin who's just focused and pays attention. Travis Hunter, more of a joker who, you know, has fun and dances and acts a fool. They do it totally differently, but these are two prime time players, guys that are crucial to the Jaguars' future, because if you have Brian Thomas on one side dominating and you have Travis Hunter on the other side dominating, that also means that Trevor Lawrence is probably dominating too. And if those three guys are dominating for the Jaguars, the rest is going to take care of itself for the Jaguars. That's just how it goes. So I have no problem at all with Travis Hunter dancing. I have no problem at all with him, you know, just being over the top with it. Like I said, the guy has backed it up ever since he stepped on at, you know, Jackson State, at Colorado. I don't expect things to change now. The guy is so fluid. And people are saying he has got better at his route running. He smoothed things out a lot. Look, that was going to happen whether he danced or not. That happens with reps in the NFL. You start getting reps, you start becoming a better player. That's how it goes no matter if you're at Pee Wee or in the pros. Reps make you a better player in football. So, like, I don't think that traces back to his personality or his character at all. I think with him getting reps with these NFL coaches and being at the next level and seeing how other pros run their routes. That's a big thing too, because he's around the very best players too. So he's seeing how they do things, how they set you up one way and do the opposite, the deception in the route running. And he's picking things from their game and implementing it into his own game. So to me, I have no problem with Travis Hunter at all. Like I said, going back to the Chuck Daly quote, you don't put a saddle on a Mustang. Let him be a Mustang, because Travis Hunter is the definition of a Mustang in the National Football League. Now, I would play him primarily on one side of the football just to protect him, because I think the hits are just so much bigger at the professional level. So if you want to put a saddle on the Mustang that way by primarily playing him on offense or primarily playing on defense, whichever way you go, I think you got to protect him by limiting his hits, by making sure he doesn't get teed off on by playing too many snaps in the NFL. But as far as personality, character, I have no problem with Travis Hunter. Seems like an all-around good dude. And yeah, he does it differently than Brian Thomas, but that doesn't mean he's a bad kid or he's a distraction to this football team, which some people seem to be implying. I just don't think that's the case at all. I think he's actually going to be good for this football team, and I think he's going to keep things lighthearted for the Jaguars. I think eventually his attitude and his character will be infectious, and I think more people will have more fun. And I think other free agents are going to start looking at the Jaguars and thinking to themselves, you know what? They're having fun over there. I want to go play there too, because when you're having fun, it takes care of everything. And suddenly you start attracting these free agents. Suddenly everybody wants to play for the Jaguars, because guess what? Travis Hunter was a lightning rod for everyone else having fun too. So, like I said, I have no problem with Travis Hunter, and I'm excited for him. Moving on, the Jimmy Horn story. And I'm really excited for Jimmy Horn, because this guy was a 6th-round pick, and I think he has a chance to be the steal of the draft. I think the Carolina Panthers hit a home run when they took Jimmy Horn in the 6th round, because this guy is so good. He's so fluid in and out of his breaks. The route running, crisp to a T. Just so good and so fluid. Runs so well that the guy can get separation and he can get open. Whether it's college at Colorado, whether it's in the NFL for the Panthers, this is a really good football player. And like I said, I think he can be the steal in the draft. I think the Panthers made a huge splash with one of their late round picks by getting Jimmy Horn. And the fact that they were able to land this guy so late, you have to give credit to their front office, their scouting department, and their GM for being able to recognize talent in the later rounds of the draft, because this guy's going to make a big impact for them. And you can already see it at OTAs. You can already see that, he's looking like a very good football player. And not just his route running, his footwork is so crisp and so smooth. And you can see why he's so good at getting in and out of his breaks, because his footwork is that good. When he's going through those ladder drills, the speed ladder, and he's concentrating on footwork, there's no wasted steps. It's so smooth and it's fluid, and it's perfect. The choppiness of it is perfect. He's always got his feet under him, and he's never off balance. So the things that you see on the speed ladder translate into his route running. He's very efficient when he's running his routes, because if you get off balance, you start to stumble a little bit. Now your rhythm and timing with your quarterback is thrown off, but that doesn't happen with Jimmy Horn, because he always has his feet under him. His weight balance, he balances his weight perfectly. He doesn't get, lean into one side too much where he starts to stumble. Nothing like that. It's always perfect, and he runs so well. And when it gets into him having to shake somebody, shake a defender by setting you up one way and doing the opposite, it's perfect. He doesn't get out of stride at all. He gets in and out of those breaks perfectly. And that's exactly what we saw at Colorado too. I'm only going off what I see at OTAs and the plays he's making at OTAs right now, but that's a very small sample size in the National Football League for the Panthers. A lot of what I know about Jimmy Horn goes back to his time at Colorado, with Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, and Travis Hunter. And, I always notice this guy opposite of Travis Hunter on offense. I'm like, yeah, Travis Hunter is a great player, but don't overlook this Jimmy Horn guy. I mean, the guy is making plays, getting in the end zone, taking the top off the defense, running those post routes down the middle of the field, and making catches in traffic. A defender trying to jump all over his back, and somehow Jimmy Horn's still hauling in the football, despite the contact, and, completing the catch. So I was always high on Jimmy Horn. I'm like, don't overlook this guy. And I know Shedeur Sanders has, one of the best athletes in all college football, and Travis Hunter, a guy playing both sides of the ball, which is a testament of how great of an athlete he is. But this other guy, Jimmy Horn, on the opposite side of the field, is a big-time player too. And he's also helping Shedeur Sanders out a lot, because he's moving the chains, he's making big plays, and he's getting in the end zone. And that's all you can ask from your receivers. And, with everything we saw at Colorado, how good he was, he hasn't skipped a beat now that he's a professional. He hasn't skipped a beat. He's the real deal. And he had no business falling all the way to the 6th round. He had no business falling to the 6th round. The guy was way too good to go in the 6th round. At the very least, this guy's a 3rd round pick. I think about Terry McLaurin when everybody knew at the Senior Bowl? I think it was the Senior Bowl. What is it? The Reese's Senior Bowl? Down in, what was it? Down in Alabama, Mobile, Alabama. Is it the Senior Bowl? I can't, there's so many bowls and things. I don't know if it was actually the Senior Bowl or what they call it. But everybody knew Terry McLaurin was a really good football player there. And I think Terry McLaurin went in the 3rd round. This is another example of a big-time talent falling down in the draft, a guy that's a wide receiver that everybody kind of had a hint was a really good football player, and then for some reason it doesn't materialize on draft day like it's supposed to. Kind of like Shedeur Sanders falling the 5th round. Very much like Shedeur Sanders, I'll say. And were they just trying to punish all the Colorado guys? I don't know. Maybe they were trying to punish Deion and saying, his players and his prospects coming out of Colorado, they're all going to be cocky, arrogant, whatever. Who knows? But all I know is Jimmy Horn's a really good football player that had no business falling to the 6th round. And right now, if I had to say who's the steal of the draft, I think the Panthers got the steal of the draft, because when you get a 6th round talent that is a guy that can be a starter from day one and a guy that can be a big contributor to your offense. Look at the wide receivers. I always think about Marcus Colston going in the 7th round to the Saints and how much he was able to dominate the National Football League. Do the Panthers have kind of their version of that, where they got this 6th round pick that was electrifying in college at Colorado that is now not skipping a beat when he becomes a pro? That's what we could be talking about, a guy of that caliber, when we're talking about Jimmy Horn. And I always liked his story too at Colorado. It was tough what he went through with his dad, and his dad being incarcerated, and Deion Sanders kind of looking out for him and mentoring him. Say what you want about Deion Sanders, but he took Jimmy Horn under his wing. And clearly Deion Sanders looking out for Jimmy Horn helped Jimmy Horn become the best version of himself. So whether you like Deion Sanders or not, you have to applaud Deion Sanders for that, because he clearly helped Jimmy Horn Jr. become a great player, get drafted, and now he looks primed for success in the National Football League. These are the players that the NFL and these GMs are punishing, these Colorado guys. I mean, don't get me wrong, Travis Hunter didn't get punished, but Shedeur Sanders drops to the 5th round, Jimmy Horn drops to the 6th round. Something doesn't add up with that because both of those guys are what? At the very least, Shedeur a 2nd round, Jimmy Horn a 3rd round. But they go 5th and 6th? Doesn't make any sense. I don't like it. And the league's about to find out real soon because I have a feeling Shedeur Sanders and Jimmy Horn Jr. are both going to clap back at these front offices and make them pay for overlooking them. Moving on. We have the Lamar Jackson versus Joe Burrow debate. And I saw this debate online. Who's better, Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow? And their stats were somewhat similar, very close. And they're like, who's better? And to me, I'm like, to me, Lamar's better. And here's why. You look at Joe Burrow's offensive weapons that he had on his teams, and he was surrounded with offensive talent. The fact that Lamar Jackson has been scraping and getting by with his offensive talent and in a lot of ways has outperformed Joe Burrow tells me that Lamar Jackson is better than Joe Burrow. Look at Joe Burrow's receivers. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, he had Tyler Boyd. I mean, he was stacked at the wide receiver position. Stacked. I mean, he had weapons all over the field. And that was a big part. The Bengals went to that Super Bowl. And they didn't get the job done. And you could say, well, Lamar Jackson has a better team overall than the Bengals, but a lot of that talent was on defense. Look at Lamar Jackson's wide receivers. He's been begging for wide receivers. Just got Zay Flowers, just got some help, a guy that is at least reliable and a guy that can help him get the job done offensively. And don't get me wrong, he had Mark Andrews, but that's a big difference from what Joe Burrow had with all his weapons. Joe Burrow has been propped up a little bit by all his weapons. And don't get me wrong, Joe Burrow is a phenomenal player. He throws the football all over the place. But you can't tell me he wasn't a little bit propped up by all that offensive talent that he was surrounded by. He had so many wide receivers. They were so deep at the position that his third option was a really good football player. Lamar Jackson has been waiting and finally got a reliable first option in Zay Flowers. You know, Mark Andrews is a tight end. And to me, it's not even close. If you put Lamar Jackson in Joe Burrow's offenses with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, with Tyler Boyd, what do you think Lamar would have did with all those weapons? He would be blowing us away with all these huge numbers that he's putting up. It would be mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling, the numbers that Lamar Jackson would put up with all those weapons. How much success he would have, the wins he would be putting up, the offensive explosion of points on the board that Lamar Jackson would be able to put up with all those weapons. It would be mind-boggling. You wouldn't even know how to assess it because you'd be like, this is the most explosive offense we've ever seen. We've never seen anything like this. You know, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, it would be bombs away if Lamar Jackson played in that system. So the fact that Lamar Jackson is beating Joe Burrow individually when you look at their two careers, the fact that he's beating him in all these different categories, it's like, that tells me Lamar Jackson's better. And like I said, don't get me wrong, collectively the Ravens have a better team, but a lot of that talent was on defense. And to me, it's a no-brainer. You have to go Lamar Jackson here because put Jamar Chase, put T. Higgins, put Tyler Boyd early on in Joe Burrow's career. Put those weapons on the Ravens with Lamar. Put all those weapons. Lamar would already have a Super Bowl by now. No doubt about it. Look at last year. Mark Andrews drops a touchdown, or what is it? Mark Andrews drops the what was it? A 2-point conversion in the corner of the end zone. He drops it. They score a touchdown, and then Mark Andrews. I'm pretty sure it was a 2-point conversion. Mark Andrews drops it. Was it a touchdown? Was it just actually they were going for the touchdown and he dropped it? I can't remember if it was a touchdown or a 2-point conversion. I'm processing a lot of information here. I'm pretty certain they scored and it was the 2-point conversion they were going for and he dropped it. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty certain. But like I said, I got a lot of NFL information processing upstairs. You know, sometimes a play here or there can turn a little blurry because I'm pulling from all these different storylines and information. It's hard to remember every single play down to a T. Sometimes plays start to get blurry, and then I have my own playing career from a little kid all the way to an adult. So I've seen a lot of plays, man. They all start to blur together at some point, so bear with me. But like I said, I got Lamar Jackson over Joe Burrow just because I think Joe Burrow has been a little bit propped up by the offensive weapons he's been surrounded by with the Bengals. And this past year, I was really impressed by Joe Burrow. I thought Joe Burrow was throwing the football everywhere. He was chucking that thing all over the place last year. So I was really impressed with him as a quarterback, solely as a quarterback this past year. But he has been a little bit propped up by the weapons around him, and you can't tell me otherwise. Moving on, the Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers debate. So the consensus right now is Malik Nabers is the guy, and he's going to be a better player than Marvin Harrison Jr. But guess what? Careers are longer than just 1 year. Careers are longer than just 1 year. And I'm here to tell you that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the better player between him and Malik Nabers. Now, don't get me wrong, Malik Nabers, very good as a rookie. He earned everything he got last year in terms of attention and fame and respect. He earned that. But in the long run, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the better player. And let me tell you why. I like Marvin Harrison Jr.'s build better. I think Malik Nabers is very shifty, and he's good at, breaking away from the defenders by getting in and out of his breaks. But I think frame matters a lot in the National Football League, and I like Marvin Harrison Jr.'s frame better. And I think when it comes down to it, when these defenses start making adjustments and both of these players have to play through contact, they have to make the catch through contact. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be able to make the catch through contact better than Malik Nabers is. And don't get me wrong, Malik Nabers ripped it up as a rookie. But we're talking about the next 10 or 15 years. And over that time, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to separate himself from Malik Nabers and prove he is the best receiver from this draft class. And to me, it's just like, eventually Kyler Murray, and you could start to see it last year, even as a rookie when Marvin Harrison Jr. was a rookie, he was starting to realize, Kyler Murray was starting to realize that he's got to feed this guy. And sometimes he's got to force feed this guy because that's how big of a talent Marvin Harrison Jr. is. You have to make sure he's involved because this offense is going to be the best version of themselves when, Marvin Harrison Jr. is taking the game over, when the majority of their offense, their passing offense, is flowing through Marvin Harrison Jr. So, to me, I think Kyler Murray makes the adjustment of basically saying, hey, not only do we have to feed this guy, we have to force feed this guy at times. Sometimes we're going to have to throw it into double coverage to Marvin Harrison Jr. Sometimes, when the play is called to someone else, we're going to have to come back and actually throw it to Marvin Harrison Jr. because we just have to make sure this guy's involved because when he's feeling good and when he's feeling energized, the Cardinals have a chance to go to that next level. That's how good I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be for this Cardinals offense. And really, it's the frame. I think when it comes down to it, eventually down the road, I think he's going to be able to play through contact better than Malik Nabers is going to. And I think that's going to be the difference maker. And I always go back to early on in Mike Evans' career, I was super high on Mike Evans. And someone came back at me and was like, what are you talking about? Odell Beckham Jr. is better than Mike Evans, and he's going to have a better career than Mike Evans. How's that working out now? Why was Mike Evans better than Odell Beckham Jr.? And why was I able, all the way back then, when they were both first-year players, why was I able to see that Mike Evans would be better than Odell Beckham Jr. later on down the road? Even though Odell Beckham Jr. came out with a lot of electricity. He was electric early on in his career. But I knew that Mike Evans would go on to be the better player. Same exact situation as Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. Same exact situation. I knew when it came down to it that Mike Evans would be able to play through contact better than Odell Beckham Jr. could do. Sure, Odell Beckham Jr. had his moments. He was electrifying. He had the one-handed catch. He was getting in the end zone routinely. Remember, early on in his career, he was a hothead, punching the net, getting in trouble. But he had taken the world by storm. But I'm like, Mike Evans basically made Johnny Manziel. Mike Evans has a better frame than Odell Beckham Jr. Not by a little bit, by a lot. Odell Beckham Jr. is a small, little guy. Mike Evans, a big receiver that can run well, just like Marvin Harrison Jr. can. And how'd it play out? I was pounding the table for Mike Evans, and I had that person reach out to me and basically rip me and say Odell Beckham Jr. is better now. Odell Beckham Jr. is going to have a better career. John, you don't know ball. Tell me I don't know ball. Mike Evans ended up being the better player. Mike Evans is one of the greatest receivers we've ever seen. Same thing's going to happen with Marvin Harrison Jr. He's got a better frame than Malik Nabers. He's going to play through contact better than Malik Nabers. And last time I checked, careers aren't defined by your rookie season, and they're not defined by one season. They're defined by your whole entire career. And if you looked at all the all-time great receivers, you would be surprised by how many wide receivers were not that good in their first season. Sometimes it took time for these guys to be all-time greats. I mean, it happens. Like, it took a little bit for Terrell Owens to learn from Jerry Rice and become an all-time great. Antonio Brown, it took a little bit of time for him to become an all-time great. It happens. Some guys need a little time to develop to fulfill their potential. Now, Marvin Harrison coming out of Ohio State, everybody was raving about this guy. We all knew he was a big-time football player. But give him time to build up to his full potential. And that's when we'll see him surpass Malik Nabers, because he's going to play through contact better than Nabers, and because he's going to have a lot better frame than Malik Nabers, and he runs very well too. Reminds me a lot of Mike Evans. It reminds me a lot of the Mike Evans and Odell Beckham Jr. debate. Now, in Malik Nabers' defense, I think Malik Nabers has a better frame than Odell Beckham Jr. does. Odell Beckham Jr., out of all those guys we talked about, has the worst frame. He's a small, undersized receiver that was very quick. Very quick and an electric football player when he was in his prime. But frame matters in the NFL because you have to be able to play through contact, because you look at a lot of these defensive backs these days. Teams want these longer defensive backs, taller guys, longer arms, big wingspan, the Richard Sherman type corners. And when you got these bigger defensive backs that are hanging on your back trying to break up the pass, you have to be able to play through contact. That's what separated Mike Evans from Odell Beckham Jr. That's what will separate Marvin Harrison Jr. from Malik Nabers down the road. Like I said, Malik Nabers has a better frame than Odell Beckham Jr. Mike Evans and Marvin Harrison Jr. have the best two frames out of those four guys. Worse would probably be Odell Beckham Jr. and Malik Neighbors. Then it's probably Marvin Harrison Jr. And then it's probably Mike Evans. So flip it. The best would be Mike Evans Jr., then Marvin Harrison Jr., then Malik Neighbors, and then the worst would be Odell Beckham Jr. So that's why I think a lot of people are going to be surprised when Marvin Harrison Jr. ends up surpassing Malik Neighbors. And don't get me wrong, I already know the pushback I'll get on that. Nobody is hated more than somebody that tells the truth. The truth is offensive. It cuts deep, and people don't like that. People are going to hate me. They're going to say I'm wrong. They said the same thing when I said Mike Evans over Odell Beckham Jr. Now, look at how that panned out. That's why I'm the guy on the podcast talking about football, because of my extensive football background going back to when I was a kid all the way to an adult. I've been around the game a lot more than some guy that just chirps in the comment section. No offense, because without you guys, we wouldn't even have a show. So you guys matter, and your input does matter. But reps as a player, reps around the game, being a semi-pro football owner. My family owned a semi-pro football team. I played as a kid till I was an adult. I played semi-pro as an adult. My family owned a semi-pro football team. I played for a semi-pro football team that won a national championship. I've seen a lot of football from a kid to an adult. So, it's hard for someone that just passively watches the game and kind of makes an assessment, Odell Beckham Jr. is better than Mike Evans. It's hard for that guy to beat me when I've been around the game since I was a kid. Who's going to win? The guy that has extensive knowledge of the game from being around it, or someone that just passively makes an assessment? It's not hard to see who's going to win. The guy that actually has been around the game. So I'm well aware that people are going to push back. I'm well aware people are going to be angry. I'm well aware that most people think Malik Neighbors is that guy. I'm here to tell you Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to surpass Malik Neighbors. Just sit around and watch and grab your popcorn, because it's going to happen. That's all I got for this latest episode of the Football Game Tonight podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm John Kuzma. Check us out wherever podcasts are found. Subscribe to us. You can be a member by clicking the link in the comment or in the episode description box. Thank you guys so much. If you guys do that, I'm John Kuzma. I'm signing off.